All right, hey, Sunday morning, was in the swamp yesterday. I've had a chance to rewatch some of the games we talked about, and then of course there's a couple more with LSU tonight and USC, LSU, and Boston College, Florida State. Thoughts haven't really changed too much on those two games, so we'll leave most of that alone. Talk a little bit about what happened yesterday. I did a full reaction, like kind of a raw reaction. It didn't get uploaded until about 11 last night. Just never could get good service, but I did pull over and recorded about 15 minutes outside of Gainesville. So the reaction's pretty raw. It just kind of came out a little bit later, but it's actually doing well. So thank you guys for watching that. I'll talk about UF at the very end of the UF in Miami at the very end of this because you've probably already watched that reaction. But if you haven't, again, I'll link it so you can see the full thing later. Good day of college football yesterday. I was driving and in the swamp for a lot of it. I watched most of the A&M Notre Dame game on my drive the rest of the way up to Tallahassee where I am now. But man, a good day of football yesterday. But man, the day essentially went about like we thought it would, and we certainly missed on the Penn State West Virginia game. But I do want to talk about that game. I thought it was closer than it could have been closer if but it also could have been much further apart. So anyway, college football addiction. Thank you guys for tuning in. These are a little bit less edited, produced, just kind of give you my raw thoughts on a Sunday morning before I go get my day started up here in Tallahassee. The Knowles kickoff tomorrow night at 7:30. We can start with that Penn State game. Yeah, I thought Penn State in West Virginia was a game that was very sloppy early, obviously. Aller didn't look great early. I'll say that too. Like I had a lot of questions about what he would look like, and that's kind of why I liked West Virginia in this game. And the at the end of the day, Penn State's running backs just too much. West Virginia had to settle for field goals too many times. Penn State drove down and scored a couple of times, and they were able to capitalize by getting the ball in the end zone. West Virginia wasn't able to do that, right? They had to kick field goals. They settled. Had they scored touchdowns, right? If you add touchdowns instead of field goals, it's a different game. It's a different game around, you can't play the if game. But I thought both teams played sloppy. Penn State certainly deserved to win. I mean, they won. They ended up being a blowout on the road. But if you finish drives, right, and that scored 14-13 instead of 13-6, West Virginia, if they could finish drives, could have been up. And then you look at the fact that then you also gave up a touchdown at the very end of a half off of a couple of beautiful balls by Drew Aller. I gave Aller, I didn't really give him crap, but I just didn't know that I was ready to buy in fully. I mean, he looked great yesterday. Now, you do kind of wonder how much has West Virginia's defense improved from last year to this year. I know they had a lot of changes. I know they had a lot of stuff going on there, but you kind of wonder big picture how much they've improved. I think they'll get better as the year goes on. So I'll probably say this 4 times in this video. Don't overreact to week one just too much, right? Certainly don't want to do that in the Florida-Miami game. Don't want to do that in the Clemson-Georgia game. You got to take everything with a grain of salt until you get a couple of weeks in and you really know a little bit more about these teams. And so I don't know that I'm ready to crown Drew Aller as a Heisman candidate just yet, but he did look really good at times yesterday. He made some elite throws, some on-target precision passes that were really, really good. And he was – I thought Green played fine. Aller was great. He was the difference in the game. Penn State's running backs really, really good. Garrett Green, I didn't think played poorly. Again, they just got that Penn State defense is legit, and they play the brand of football that is like, hey, you might get down to the 20, you might get down in scoring position, but we're gonna bow up once you get across that 50 and then inside of the 30 and you kind of get into the red zone of the 20. We're not going to let you score there, and they did a really good job of that, and that's very reminiscent. Like James Frank, that doesn't surprise me at all, right? Like they play hard nosed defense, and West Virginia just never really found it. They never really found the ability to capitalize, right? If you can convert into touchdowns, if you don't fumble the ball away, which Penn State had fumbles too, but if you don't fumble the ball away, if you convert into touchdowns, if you don't give up the score right there at the end of the half, like little things that you need to do, that's a game at halftime. And then there's the long delay. And once the delay happened, they were already up big, and Penn State just kind of salted it away. So I thought West Virginia had their chances to keep the game close. I don't know that it would have mattered in the end. I don't know that they would have seriously had a chance to win the game. And that's no shot at West Virginia. Penn State just looked like the better team. And they were, right? Like it didn't just look like it. They were the better team. And Penn State looks like they might actually be a threat this year, right? And we say that yearly. They ended up falling to the Big Two in the Big Ten. But we'll see. Penn State certainly looked impressive to me. Going on the road, having some mistakes early. Morgantown is certainly not an easy place to play. Going on the road, having some mistakes. They stepped up to the table or stepped up to the plate, whatever cliche you want to use, and they took care of business. And so, shout out Penn State. Good performance. One of the better performances yesterday. um, Against what I think is going to be a good team. West Virginia has to rebound, right? Like you've got a tough Big 12 schedule this year. It doesn't set up easy for them. They want to improve on last year's um, season, and that's not going to be easy to do. And so they've got their work cut out for them. We'll see how they do in the Big 12. I'm not ready to write them off just yet. Again, they were really close. They won't see many defenses like that Penn State defense, but they were close to keeping that thing competitive. Just couldn't finish well enough. I think they'll finish a little bit better when it gets to Big 12 play. I think they'll score more points. I think they'll be more competitive. I think the defense will get better throughout the year. We'll see. Not trying to overreact too much and say that West Virginia's season's done or Penn State's a playoff team just yet. But Penn State plays like that 10, 11 more times. They certainly will be a playoff team. Georgia, Clemson, the other game at noon. Man, I'm not patting myself on the back so much here, but this went exactly like I thought, like Brian and I talked about from Clemson Football Live. I thought that Clemson had a really nice defensive performance in the first half, and then they just got worn out. Right, this is kind of what we expected. Kind of a trademark of where I think Clemson is right now. Really, really good defense, kind of stagnant offense. Again, Dabo's not on the. Dabo even said it. Like when you play a team like Georgia, you get exposed. This is not. I don't think there's a referendum on him and his program. This specific game, Georgia does this to a lot of people. Remember, so. But I do think we're going to have to see a lot from Clemson. They've got two big games coming up. They play they play against NC State, and then they play at Florida State a few weeks later. Like I think those are two of their next four games. They got a couple of cupcakes sandwiched in there too that they should win pretty easily. But how do they play at NC State, or how to play against NC State? I'm sorry, and then how do they play at FSU? If they split, they're probably fine because that's just one conference loss. If they win both, they're in really good shape in the ACC. If they were to lose both, I think the wheels kind of come off. I'm not telling you I think that happens. Florida State's got their own struggles. NC State didn't look amazing this weekend by any means. So we'll see a little bit more about NC State when they play Tennessee. We'll see more about Florida State when they play Boston College on Monday night. But I think that it's to be determined for Clemson. Cade had a couple of nice throws, but he just doesn't look like he's. Would it shock you if Cade? I saw a tweet this morning. Would it shock you if Cade and DJ weren't the starting quarterbacks when Clemson goes to Florida State and plays? Maybe a little bit. Maybe it would certainly surprise me, but I don't know that I would be just like shocked out of my mind. I think that Clemson's defense still really, really good. That D line is serious, but eventually Georgia was going to break through. I'll also say I didn't think Georgia looked super sharp to start the game. I thought that they just, Carson Beck looked like he was out of sync. Not having McConkey, not having Bowers there maybe was a big deal. But they looked out of sync. Man, they're, for all that's made about ETN, obviously they've got other running backs that are just elite. Really nice debut there for Georgia's running backs. I thought that was a classic Georgia game where, hey, we're not going to make the big mistake. We're not going to put ourselves in harm's way. It may take us a while to get going, and then we're going to win this thing going away. That's kind of how I thought it would go. I thought if Clemson could find a way to stay in it in the fourth quarter, maybe they'd have a shot at keeping it close, covering the spread. The spread started doing weird stuff. I'm really not super certain why it fell from, whatever it was, 14 down to like 11. But I snatched it up at 14, and then I snatched it up at 11 too. And so that was weird to me. I don't know what the thinking there was, or if that was public money or sharp money or what, but that one didn't make sense to me at all. Georgia's going to be really good this year. I mean, that's a really talented Clemson team. Clemson's got some wide receivers that I thought made some nice plays yesterday. Cage is not enough, going up. It's hard to judge. Is Clemson that bad, or is Georgia just that good? Well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. It's probably not all of either one. But Clemson certainly didn't look good. And again, I don't think that's the referendum. I don't think that's the final calling card on their season. But I do think they need to start to turn things around pretty quickly. It gets easier, right? I'm not going to put NC State and Florida State on Georgia's level, but from an overall standpoint, I don't know that it gets that much easier. You got to go play tough teams. Got to go to Tallahassee, no matter what their issues are. That's always a tough place to play. Clemson's got to figure stuff out quickly. Georgia looks every bit the part. Wear down a really good defense and ended up putting 30 plus on them. That's really impressive. And to do most of it in the second half. They're a legit team, right? And there's a reason they're number one. There's a reason they're picked to win it all. Every year for the last however many years. They're really good. They have to get off to better starts. I think once they get into SEC play, they're going to play better teams than Clemson for sure. The schedule's pretty tough this year for Georgia. It wouldn't shock me if they lost one, maybe even two at some point. They got the big one with Alabama coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to try and be there for that. They've got work to do. But I think Georgia's going to be really good this year. And I'm not, shocker, right? I'm not breaking any news there. But, yeah, Georgia looks every bit the part of a top 3 team in the country. And I don't really think that's super debatable. Kirby's going to have them focused. They're going to be ready to go every week. They look like they were having fun yesterday in the second half. That team's going to be legit, and they're going to hurt a lot of feelings this year. It all kind of turns – I know they've got, again, games in between, but it all kind of turns to that Bama game. And what does that look like? What are they able to do? Are they able to avenge that SEC championship loss from last year? If so, I think they'll be in really good shape. If not, then the question still kind of remains. All right, you can do it all, but you got to beat Bama at some point. So I think they will. I'm picking Georgia early in that game. We'll see how things go. Want to see Bama against, Wisconsin didn't look very good this weekend either, so maybe it doesn't even matter. But would like to see a few more Bama games. They play USF next week. USF had a nice win against Bethune, but certainly not the same level of competition there. USF, Wisconsin, as Alabama. We'll see when they play Georgia. What was the 3:30? 3:30 was the Florida-Miami game. We'll talk about that one in just a minute. Let's move on to Texas A&M. Notre Dame. Hey, if you're watching this, if you're listening on audio podcast, which we do have an audio podcast, you can go check out now. College Football Addiction link is in the description. If you're watching this, please do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Let's talk a little bit about A&M and Notre Dame. Again, this one kind of went down like we thought. I didn't necessarily think that Notre Dame was going to run away with it or win big. Two great defenses, and you really got kind of a classic game. I know we like points. I know we like a ton of scoring. You didn't really have that. Both teams first half just feeling each other out, when it was, they could drive a little bit, but the defenses certainly were really, really good and played kind of bend, don't break. 6-6 at one point, and you're thinking, man, is this, are we going to get any points? Are we going to get anything going? Notre Dame finally breaks through. A&M comes back to tie it up at 13. And, I thought Wigman was he was okay. Obviously, a couple of big mistakes. I don't think they hurt him that bad, though. I think Notre Dame only scored 3 points off the 2 interceptions, if I'm remembering that correctly. I thought he was okay. I thought he was good in some spots. He made some nice throws. I think A&M will be okay. Their schedule is tough this year. I'll actually pull that up while we're talking right now. But I think A&M, I like Elko. So I think that they'll be, in pretty good shape. I think he knows how to build a program. I certainly like the way that they recruit. They still have a lot of talent left over from the Jimbo Fisher era. This is where the A&M schedule, you certainly have a chance to do some things. You're going to beat McNeese, and then you have Bowling Green 2 weeks after that. But sandwiched in between those two is a game in Gainesville at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium against the Florida Gators. And we saw what the Florida Gators did yesterday. I would expect Florida to play better against A&M. I think Miami's probably a better team than A&M. That's projecting because I can't, teams haven't played each other. We've only seen 60 minutes of football so far this year. But that game is going to be huge for both teams. Florida is going to need to win that game for probably Billy Napier's career, his Florida career. If they lose to A&M, they've already got losses to Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, probably in Knoxville, LSU, Florida State. The path to a bowl gets extremely dire if they can't beat A&M. And then the same thing for A&M. You lose to Notre Dame. Okay, that's a top 10 team. You were favored, but only by a field like that. We'll forgive that. First game of a new era. But then if you beat McNeese State, and nobody cares about McNeese for sure, and then you got to play at Florida. Florida thought of as a pretty bad team. I'd imagine that A&M's a favorite going to that game, but I think it's close. A&M -3, A&M -4, something like that. You can timestamp that and come back and call me on it if you want. But if you can beat Florida, you're starting 3-1, and then you play Arkansas in the Southwest Classic. Just a week later. And I think that they're better than Arkansas. I think they win that in Arlington. Texas at Jerry World. You get Missouri later. You have, it gets tough later with LSU, Auburn, Texas on this schedule, but it's pretty manageable if you're A&M, right? You took a loss now. You could theoretically win your next 4 games against McNeese, Florida, Bowling Green, and Arkansas. Get back to 4-1. I mean, the Missouri game, it's going to be a good offense versus a good defense. We'll see. Not ready to make a call in that one, but go on the road to Mississippi State. I certainly think you could win that. LSU is going to be tough. At South Carolina, A&M could certainly win that. New Mexico State, they could certainly win that. At Jordan Hare, that's a tough one. And then Texas to finish it. But at home, that's at Kyle Field. They could win a lot of games, man. They could be an 8-4 team, but they gotta take care of the Floridas, the Arkansas, the South Carolinas, the New Mexico. Like there are games on there that are winnable. They probably need to beat Auburn if they want to get to that 8-win mark. But season's certainly not over for A&M. I think that if they can stay healthy, if Elko can continue to get improvement out of that team, I think they'll be really good. I thought Notre Dame was better going in. I thought Notre Dame should have been a favorite even on the road. I thought Notre Dame played better. I thought Riley Leonard looked, certainly healthy. He was running really well. He looked really good. I don't know how many defenses Notre Dame's going to see that are as good as A&M's. In fact, like we can look at their schedule real quick. You look at Notre Dame's schedule, and it's not incredibly imposing at all. Northern Illinois, that's an easy win. At Purdue, Miami of Ohio, they get Louisville, but that game's at home. They play Stanford, one of the worst teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference, as weird as that is. At Georgia Tech's an interesting one. Obviously, Georgia Tech with a big win against Florida State, but then didn't look great last night against Georgia State. Ended up winning going away. Obviously, the talent disparity there is pretty big. But Navy, that's an easy win. Florida State, we'll see again. That is at home, but we'll see what Florida State is. Virginia, terrible. Army, they'll win. And then at USC. So at USC, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, I mean, I think, they probably don't want to, but they could probably go 2-2 in those and be fine. They probably don't want to go 2-2 in those. Like, don't leave that in the committee's hands. But if they go 3-1 against that slate, I think they're in the playoff. And I think Louisville and Georgia Tech are wins, and then maybe you split with Florida State and USC at worst. Notre Dame looks like they have just because of their schedule. Now they got to go out and perform, but Notre Dame looks like they already have their name pencil marked into the playoff. They would have to really melt down against all 4, 3 or 4 of those teams that I mentioned, right? Louisville, Georgia Tech, Florida State, USC. And I don't see that. I think that they've got advantages in all of those games. I think they're going to be favored in every game, maybe minus the USC game. So I think they're in really good shape to put their names in the playoff. But again, I think A&M is going to be really good too. As far as the game, again, really impressive drive by Mike Elko, Riley Leonard, and that team late with about 5.5 minutes to go. They methodically held the ball, held the drive, and went and scored late. Now, did A&M let them score, or did it just kind of benefit A&M to let them score? I thought it was good that they scored right out of that 2-minute warning. It helped A&M a ton to be able to get the ball back. Now they couldn't do anything with it, and I thought that 4th down play call was really weird. They had been jumping routes for a lot of the night, and you just had a really nice run, so spreading them out, maybe run it again, or giving Wigman a run pass option might have been smart, but just to throw a slant to the outside, he didn't put enough zip on it, and then the DB jumped it, and that was the end of the game. They get the field goal late to win by 10, but I thought that it was really impressive for Notre Dame to go in there. A tough place to play. Like we joked with Joe about how tough that place was to play and this, that, and the other, but a tough place to play. A really good defense, 2 excellent defenses, and you saw Notre Dame come out on top. So thought they were impressive for sure. And then lastly, that Florida-Miami game. My thoughts aren't too different on that Florida-Miami game than what they have been from last night. I spent a lot of time harping on Florida, so I will give a little bit more love to Miami. They were really good. And again, it's early. So it's really hard to know, was Florida that bad or was Miami that good? Maybe Florida's not as bad as we think, and Miami is just a playoff contender, right? Maybe Miami's not as good as we think, and Florida is literally going to win 2 or 3 games this year. Or maybe it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like Miami's maybe a top 10-ish team, and Florida's not making a bowl, but they're going to win 5 games, right? Like that's to me, that's probably how I would label it. But again, we've only seen 60 minutes of football, and about 25 of that was like garbage time yesterday. So it's hard to know exactly, right? And that's what I would say is the whole idea of the video is pump the brakes just a little bit, right? Pump the brakes just a tad on any overarching, like, oh, this is what's going to happen this year because of what we saw in, 60 minutes, 35, 40 minutes of football yesterday, from the Gators and Canes. I think what's most likely is that Florida is going to win 4 or 5 games. I'd be surprised if they made a bowl. And I think Miami's going to win 10 or 11 games. Miami could certainly pee down their leg and blow it. They've done that in years past. I'll just tell you, I don't see that happening this year. I think that, and I know Cristobal gets all the jokes. I get that. Their schedule is set up so well. They're not going to lose to FAMU next week at home. They're not going to lose to Ball State the week after that at home. They're not going to lose on the road at USF. Although I do think USF is turning things around and doing things the right way. And as a Tampa guy, I like that, just because it's good for the community. It's good for everybody. Virginia Tech losing to Vandy. I have a hard time seeing Virginia Tech rebounding in 4 or 5 weeks to beat Miami down in South Florida at what should be a massive raucous environment, for a night game, 7:30 p.m. on a Friday night. At Cal, maybe the travel there is weird, but they get the extra day because they play Friday against Virginia Tech. It would shock me if Miami doesn't start the season 6-0. Then they have a couple of tough ones. It gets tougher from there. They've got a tough, what I'd say, 3 games in a 4-week stretch. Louisville on the road, Florida State at home, Duke at home. I like Miami a lot there. And then at Georgia Tech. Again, we'll see what Georgia Tech is as the year goes on. That's 3 tough games. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Miami drops one of those games. It's really hard to be perfect, right? So do they lose at Louisville? Does the rivalry get them at Florida State? Do they lose at Georgia Tech? Let's say they lose one of those games, right? I'd be surprised if they lost 2. Let's say Miami loses one of those games. They finish with Wake Forest and Syracuse. They're not losing outside of that 4-game stretch. I told you they're not losing any games this year. They're going to start 6-0, and I'll be shocked if they don't. And they're going to finish 2-0. So that's 8 wins right there. And then it's what do they do in that middle 4, right? I think they beat Duke at home. I think they probably win at least 2 of those other 3. At Louisville, at Georgia Tech, Florida State. I'd be surprised if they didn't win 2 of them. Shoot, what if they lose 1? What if they lose 2? They're still 10-2. That's still market improvement from I have a hard time not seeing Miami hit their over of 9.5 right now. Now, injuries happen. We don't know what's up with. I still don't. I got to my buddy's house here and went to bed last night. I don't know what's up with Ruben Bain. I don't know what's up with Martinez. Certainly hope that they're okay. Injuries happen. Fluky things happen, right? God forbid it. Knock on wood. If Cam Ward was to go down, yeah, they could lose more games, right? I get that. But if they stay healthy, if they don't get in their own way, if Mario Cristobal doesn't pull a Mario Cristobal, they're going to win a lot of games this year. And so I said Notre Dame in an earlier segment that Notre Dame could be penciling their name into the playoff. I don't know that Miami's ready to pencil their name into the playoff just yet because they are going to have to get to that ACC championship game. And if they have losses, losing the ACC championship game could be a big deal for them because I don't think the ACC gets the respect. But Miami looks really good. Canes fans, try to be objective again. I feel like I've got to preface everything because of the amount of crap I've given you guys over the years. Most of it probably deserved, but Miami looks really good this year. They look like they're going to compete for the conference for sure, and they look like they could potentially compete for more, right? Playoff spot or whatever. Florida, again, got to figure stuff out. I actually want to do an interview with a Florida insider that had some good thoughts on Napier and his stability, his future, just the tenure there, the thoughts around that. So maybe I'll save a lot of that talk for later. But Florida looks like they're in a ton of trouble. There's really no way around that. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Miami looks like they're legit. Florida looks like they're crap. Florida fans just, in my comments last night, we agree with you. We want to fire Napier now. Just get it over with. I don't remember who it was, but I was chatting with Allie the other day at the game, or yesterday at the game, and she said, the old saying, she said, I'm not saying that this needs to happen, but the old saying is what needs to be done eventually should just be done expeditiously, which is a quote from, I don't know who, Spurrier or Urban or Nick Saban or just one of those, legends or whatever. So I don't know. They're not firing him after week 1. But if they were to lose to A&M, I think that would be the nail in the coffin. And then if they were to, I think they'll beat Mississippi State on the road. We'll see. Mississippi State looked good yesterday against a pretty bad opponent. but put up 50+ points, what you're supposed to do in those games. Um, if they were to lose to a UCF, I think firing somebody in early October would be crazy. But if they drop to A&M and then they lose to UCF, that's it. He's canned. UCF, not overly impressive in their debut. It was week one. They ended up scoring a ton of points, but they started kind of slow. So I want to see a little bit more out of UCF. They've got some big games coming up, and we'll kind of see how that goes down. They play Colorado in a few weeks. If they beat Colorado, I think they play Colorado. Do they play Colorado the week before they play Florida, which could be pretty interesting? UCF, Colorado, yeah, then Florida the very next week. So a couple of fun ones. They play Sam Houston on Saturday, and then at TCU. I expect UCF to be 3-0 with Colorado coming to town. And shoot, Colorado plays Nebraska this week, and then Colorado State. They could be 3-0. I'd probably lean 2-1 for them. But if both teams are 3-0, the bounce house is going to be bouncing. And if I wasn't going to be in Tuscaloosa that day, I'd try and get over to Orlando because it's so close. Then they come to the Swamp. So if they beat Colorado, they're 4-0. The Gators could be 2-2 at that point. I'd be interested to see what that spread is. I'd still think the spread is like Florida -6, -7. But yeah, we'll see. Florida's got to figure some stuff out and figure some stuff out quick. I wasn't sure if I was going to say this, but I'll just put it out there. I spoke with two people who they weren't on the sideline, but they were just off the sideline. And on Florida's side at the game yesterday. And they said that the energy there, even after Montreal Johnson's big touchdown, which kind of awoke in the crowd and had the whole place pretty lit, they said the energy was just off. It felt weird. Players didn't seem engaged. Everybody looked sad. And maybe it's because they were getting blown out. And, well, they weren't getting blown out at that point. It was a 14-point game, and then Johnson's touchdown cut it to 7. So they weren't really getting blown out. But they just said the energy was very weird. Like, I don't know if that's a culture thing. I don't know what the issue there is. I think Florida's got a pretty good culture. Like, it's not even me taking shots or firing at people, but to be down 14 and then score a touchdown to cut it to 7, and the whole crowd's behind you again, and you're at home, and man, here we go, guys, going into half. Now they ended up giving the touchdown at half, but man, when I was talking with people, one at halftime, one after the game, both said like, yeah, the energy on the sideline was super weird. That's not confirmed gospel. I wasn't on the sideline. That's two people talking to me. That's two people's perception, right? That's not even a confirmed like sideline reporter saying like everybody's down in the dumps here, like watching it. That's just two people's take. So don't, but I think it's notable, right? It probably matches the effort you saw on the field. It matches the intensity you saw on the field. So again, I don't take that as gospel. You can run with it. I don't care, but it makes sense. It matches the mood of the fan base. It matches the mood of the play. It matches the way they looked. Napier called it embarrassing. He said he was disappointed. He didn't go as far as to say discouraged. I know he's asked about that in the press conference, but big win for Miami, man. And, again, I told you this, but if you want to watch the kind of the raw reaction, we'll link it here at the end. Appreciate you guys a ton for tuning in, watching. Might do this every Sunday morning. Might be a little easier when I'm not traveling, so I can actually watch the games. Had to get up early to watch the replays of a lot of stuff this morning that I wasn't able to catch live yesterday. But appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know down in the comments what games you want us to preview this week upcoming, and we will talk to you guys soon on College Football Addiction.